Title: aitah for dating an 18-year-old when I'm 34. When people hear the story, they always think I'm the villain. Maybe I am, but the truth is, no one really knows how betrayal starts. It doesn't begin with a kiss or a lie. It starts with attention, and she gave me more of it than anyone had in years. I'm 34, divorced, and until recently I thought I had my life under control. A stable job, a quiet apartment, a few friends I saw occasionally. My marriage ended 2 years ago. My wife, Lena, left after saying she was tired of being invisible. Her words, not mine. She took our cat, half my savings, and every ounce of confidence I had left. After that, I just stopped feeling much of anything. Until I met her. Her name was Emily. She was 18, smart, sarcastic, with this way of looking at you like she already knew the ending to your story. We met at the coffee shop near my office. I'd go there every morning for my overpriced espresso, and she worked behind the counter. She always got my order right. Double shot, no sugar, before I even said a word. One morning, she smiled and said, "You always look like you're running from something." It was the first time in months someone had looked at me like that, not with pity, but curiosity. So I told her, half joking, maybe I am. She laughed, wrote her number on my cup, and said, "Then maybe it'll help you slow down." We started talking. At first, it was harmless, text messages about movies, music, stupid mans. But she was different. She wasn't like the women I worked with, polished, guarded, already done with dreaming. She still had that dangerous mix of innocence and rebellion, the kind that made you feel like you could start over. When we met outside of work for the first time, she wore this old leather jacket that swallowed her whole. She told me it used to belong to her dad, who left when she was 10. "Guess I collect broken people," she said, smiling like it was a joke, but it wasn't. I didn't mean for it to become romantic. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. We'd sit by the river after her shifts, talking for hours about everything. Philosophy, fear, the future. She'd tell me how she felt trapped in her small town, how her friends were children pretending to be adults, and how she wanted to live somewhere that didn't feel like a waiting room. She reminded me of the version of myself I'd buried long ago, the dreamer, the risk-taker. And when she kissed me first, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like waking up. But that's where it started to fall apart. Because nothing that feels that good ever stays simple. People noticed. Her co-workers whispered. My boss asked why a teenager was waiting for me outside the building. My ex somehow found out, sent me a text that just said, "Really? An 18-year-old? That's your healing arc." But I didn't stop. I told myself she was an adult. She could choose. We were both consenting. And yet, there was always this invisible line I could feel but never see. Then one night, she crossed it. She showed up at my apartment crying. Said her mom kicked her out after finding our messages. She had a backpack, a trembling voice, and nowhere to go. I couldn't just send her away. She stayed. One night turned into two. Turned into weeks. I started noticing things. My toothbrush moved. My bed smelled like her shampoo. She began wearing my shirts, calling them hers. When I went to work, she'd text every hour. At first, it felt like surveillance. I told her I needed space. Just a few days. She didn't take it well. She said, "You're just like him." I asked, "Who?" She said, "My dad. You pretend to care until you get bored." That night, she left. 3 days later, my boss called me into his office. Someone had emailed the company's HR department, screenshots of our messages, photos, everything. Anonymous sender, but the email address ended with @coffeecode.com. Her workplace. She'd sent it. They fired me. Of course they did. Code of conduct violation, inappropriate relationship. The usual sanitized language for "you ruined your life." When I confronted her, she just looked at me with that same calm, unreadable expression she had the first time we met. "You shouldn't have lied to me," she said. I told her I hadn't lied. She smiled, small and tired. "You lied the moment you let me believe you still had a future." I thought that was the end of it. But betrayal doesn't just end. It spreads. My ex called again, said she'd seen screenshots online. Someone posted them on Reddit. My name wasn't there, but the story was unmistakably mine. Every word twisted, every detail exaggerated. The comments tore me apart. Predator, manipulator, disgusting, and maybe they were right. But here's the part no one knows. A month later, I got a letter. No return address. Just one line inside. You made me feel seen. That's why I had to destroy you. I should have felt angry, but instead I felt nothing. Because I understood. She didn't betray me for revenge. She did it because she wanted control. The same thing I wanted when I started all of this. Maybe that's what betrayal really is. Not cruelty, just to people trying to be seen. And realizing the only way to do that is by breaking the other person first. So, yeah, am I the asshole for dating an 18-year-old when I'm 34? Probably. But what no one tells you is that sometimes the person you ruin ends up ruining you back. Perfectly, completely, beautifully. And maybe that's the only kind of justice that ever really works. Part 2. The mirror she held up. It's been 8 months since Emily disappeared from my life. 8 months since the letter. 8 months since I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my sense of who I was. People say time heals, but I think that's just something we tell ourselves so we can keep pretending we're not rotting from the inside. Because every day since then, I've had to sit with the same unbearable question: was I really the victim, or just the story's villain refusing to admit it? After I got fired, I moved out of the city. I thought if I could get away from the noise, the gossip, the whispers, the pity, I could rebuild quietly. I rented a small house near the coast, cheap place, bare walls, a bed, a desk, a single chair, the kind of space where you can hear yourself think, and that's not always a good thing. At first, I blamed Emily for everything. I told myself she'd manipulated me, that she'd set me up, that she'd wanted to ruin me. But the longer I sat alone with my thoughts, the more those excuses started to sound hollow. I kept replaying the early days, her laughter, her curiosity, the way she'd talk about her future like it was something fragile she had to protect. And then I'd hear my own voice, calm, older, confident, telling her everything she wanted to hear. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about love. It was about power. I started seeing a therapist after my sister threatened to stop speaking to me unless I did. The first few sessions were awkward, full of silence and defensiveness. Then one day she said something that stuck. You didn't fall in love with her age. You fell in love with what her age gave you. Validation. That sentence tore through me like glass. Because she was right. When you're 34 and someone that young looks at you like you're fascinating, it fills a void you didn't even realize you had. You tell yourself it's genuine connection, but deep down it's about control. You feel important again, wanted, powerful, and when that illusion cracks, when she turns around and sees you clearly, it feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's truth. One day, I walked into the same coffee shop where we'd met. She wasn't there, of course. Someone else was behind the counter, a college kid with tired eyes. But for a second, I could almost hear her voice. That's when I saw it, pinned to the community board near the door. A flyer, guest lecture, the power of influence. How we mistake control for love. Speaker, Emily R. Carter. I stood there staring at it for a long time. It was her. She'd gone to college. Psychology major, apparently. And she was giving talks about me. About us. I went to the lecture. I told myself it was curiosity, but maybe it was punishment. When I walked into the hall, I sat in the very back, hoping she wouldn't see me. She looked older. Still young, yes, but steadier, the kind of steady you only get after breaking and rebuilding. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke about emotional grooming, about how admiration can blur into dependency, about how adults sometimes use connection to disguise control. She never said my name, but I felt every word like a blade. She said, "The cruelest part about manipulation is that sometimes the manipulator doesn't know they're doing it, because to them it feels like love." And then she looked straight into the audience. Straight into me. But love that depends on imbalance isn't love. It's hunger. I wanted to stand up, to tell her she was right, to apologize, but I couldn't move. Because for the first time, I saw what she'd done. She hadn't just exposed me to punish me. She'd forced me to see myself. After that night, I stopped trying to rebuild the old life. I sold the last of my things, moved again, took a remote job doing copywriting. Something anonymous, something quiet. But sometimes, when I open my laptop, I reread that letter she sent me. You made me feel seen. That's why I had to destroy you. I think I finally understand what she meant. She didn't destroy me to hurt me. She destroyed the illusion I built around myself, the one where I was the wounded good guy, the one who deserved affection just because had been hurt before. She forced me to look at the way I used vulnerability as armor, how I mistook her attention for permission and her trust for invitation. A few months ago, I sent her a letter. I didn't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I was sorry. Truly sorry, not for losing her, but for the imbalance I let exist between us, for the harm I didn't realize I was capable of. She never responded, but one morning I received a package. Inside was a small notebook, her handwriting. On the first page, she had written, "Forgiveness isn't about letting you feel better. It's about making sure I never feel small again." And below that, "This isn't closure, it's clarity." I don't know what redemption looks like for someone like me. Maybe it's not something you get to have. Maybe it's just learning to live with what you've done and not repeat it. Sometimes, when I sit by the window at night, I catch my reflection, older, quieter, maybe a little wiser, and I realize the real betrayal wasn't what she did to me. It was what I did to myself the moment I convinced myself that love meant being wanted, instead of being equal. So, aitah for dating an 18-year-old when I was 34, yes, absolutely. But that's not where the story ends. Because the real punishment isn't public shame or lost jobs. It's the moment you realize that the version of yourself you've been defending was the one doing the harm all along. Part 3. Reflections from the other side. It's been 6 years since I first met him, 6 years since I left, and 3 since I gave my lecture about manipulation and imbalance. And still, every so often, I think about him. Not the man I met behind the coffee counter, not the man I fell into a strange rhythm with, not the man who called me his muse, his equal, his awakening. I think about the man I saw in the mirror when I left, and a part of myself I almost lost. After I moved out, I didn't go home. I stayed with a friend, then another, living off part-time work and the occasional scholarship for college. I studied psychology because I wanted to understand why people do the things they do, why they exploit trust, why they convince themselves that admiration is love, and why victims sometimes feel complicit in their own harm. I don't think I could ever explain it to anyone properly. Most people want clear villains and clear victims. Life doesn't work that way. He wasn't evil. He was human. Human in the worst, most self-deceptive way possible. And I wasn't innocent either. I used what I learned from him. The betrayal started the moment I realized I had the upper hand. I could have kept quiet. I could have run, pretended like none of it mattered, stayed under the radar. But I didn't. I exposed him. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed boundaries. Because I needed to see that my choices mattered, that I could assert my autonomy, that I could survive being seen by someone older, someone with more experience, without giving away everything I was. I've thought about the look on his face the day I leaked the emails to HR. That mixture of shock and disbelief. That moment when the carefully constructed world he thought he controlled collapsed. Was it cruel? Maybe. But it was necessary. Years later, when I gave that lecture, I realized something. The story never belonged to him. It never belonged to anyone but me. He might have been the reason I learned the lesson, but the lesson itself was mine. I teach students about influence, power, and consent. I talk about emotional grooming and how admiration can become exploitation. I tell them, you don't need to experience betrayal to recognize it, but if you do, you must take control of your own story. Every time I speak, I feel a part of that 18-year-old girl again, trembling, hopeful, terrified, and a part of the woman I've become, resolute, careful, unbroken. I still carry guilt for how I acted. I know some people would say I was cruel, manipulative, vindictive, and maybe they're right. But what people rarely understand is this: survival sometimes demands choices that feel harsh, even if they're necessary. He learned something too, I think, not about me, not about life, about himself. That love disguised as control is not love. That power can never truly replace connection. That the things you think you deserve, attention, admiration, compliance, aren't yours to take. And if he didn't, that's on him. I don't know if has recovered. I don't want to know. Sometimes I hear from students or strangers who have seen the lecture online, "You changed my life." They say, I didn't realize what I was allowing. And in those moments, I feel some measure of peace. Because my betrayal, as painful as it was, became a lesson, not just for him but for everyone who listens. I wonder if he ever realized that betrayal isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's the only way someone can finally see themselves, and that, in the end, might be the most human lesson of all. So yes, maybe I betrayed him. Maybe I caused him pain. But he also betrayed himself the day he mistook admiration for love. And sometimes, the only way for someone to heal is to see the truth reflected in the eyes of someone they tried to control. I don't regret it. I only regret that it took so long for either of us to truly see.